Hi, and good morning from Reno, Nevada and the University of Nevada, Reno. This morning, we welcome everyone joining us from around the world. My name is Michael Graf. I'm going to give a quick tech intro about how our Zoom call will go today, and then I will hand it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Karina Black. This morning is being captioned. If you would like to view the captions, click the subtitle button at the bottom of your screen. You can also click to see the full transcript. Because we are broadcasting internationally this morning with various time zones and various internet capabilities, if there is any video or audio interruption, please do hang in there with us as we work to bring back any of our speakers and panelists. In the meantime, we will have a Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. If you would like to submit a question, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. You can also elect to raise your hand and we will call in the order that we see that hands are raised. I will facilitate the Q&A section with Judge Doherty, our moderator, and David, our speaker this morning. And if there's any technical questions, please also submit to the chat and we will try to help out as well. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Dr. Karina Black and David Anyaele.
Good morning from Reno, Nevada. We are so excited to host one of the first virtual IVLP Gold Star events. And we actually have over 175 people signed up for this event. And we are so excited to honor David Anyaele and his amazing experiences. So before we hear from our Gold Star alumnus, I wanted to introduce a couple of special messages from our colleagues at the US Department of State, who are tremendous supporters of the International Visitor Leadership Program and our Global Ties Network. First, I'd like to share a video message from Assistant Secretary Marie Royce. Marie Royce was unanimously confirmed by the US Senate and sworn in as Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs in 2018. She oversees a wide range of programs to advance US foreign policy objectives through educational, professional, cultural, and sports exchanges that promote mutual understanding between the people of the United States and people of other nations. A former businesswoman and professor, Ms. Royce has over 30 years of experience in the private sector with Fortune 500 companies, and as a small business owner, creating and launching startups and new initiatives and serving as a key business liaison to 80 countries. Directly following Assistant Secretary Royce's message, we will hear from Deputy Assistant Secretary Susan Crystal, who fortunately is able to join us live at today's presentation. Susan Crystal is the DAS Deputy Assistant Secretary for Professional and Cultural Exchanges. She is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service with prior overseas assignments in Canada, Australia, Ecuador, Haiti, Mauritius, and South Africa. DAS Crystal has advanced career development innovations for the 14,000 members of the Foreign Service to develop and sustain an agile and diverse workforce. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, she worked in constituent services for a member of the US Congress prior to joining the Foreign Service. Welcome, DAS Crystal. And now for a special message from the Assistant Secretary, Marie Royce.
The State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs is honored to partner with the Global Ties U.S. Network in hosting the 2020 Gold Stars. This year's Gold Star program for distinguished alumni of the International Visitor Leadership Program, or IVLP, gives us an important opportunity to mark the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, commonly referred to as the ADA. The ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life in the United States. To our Gold Star alumni, congratulations on your extraordinary work in support of disability rights in your countries. Thank you for sharing your accomplishments and the impact of the IVLP on your work since returning home. To promote awareness of your great work, I encourage you to use the hashtag #AccessForAll. To our guests, thank you for joining today's important discussion about access for all and advocacy in support of inclusion and civil rights. Your work is truly making this world a better place for all.
Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Crystal. As announced by Karina, I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs and work with our Assistant Secretary, Marie Royce. Thank you, first of all, Karina and your team at Reno in Northern Nevada International Center for this wonderful program. It's all a brave new world for all of us, so we're really learning as we go, and it's great to see so many people from around the country, around our country, and around the globe. Congratulations to our IVLP alumnus, David Anyaele. David, it's great to have you with us today and for your selection as a Gold Star. I certainly am looking forward to hearing more about what you've been doing in Nigeria, both before and since your IVLP program. Thank you to Karina and her team, Mike Graf and Kevin Sung, for making this virtual program possible so that David could come to Reno and talk a little bit more about his program. And thank you in advance to Judge Francis Doherty for your support. I understand, Judge, that you've been an active participant with our IVLP program for a number of years, and it's great to meet you virtually, if not in person. Our partners at Meridian International Center and Global Pittsburgh have played big roles in David's virtual exchange program. As Karina noted, I'm originally from Pittsburgh and had the wonderful opportunity to intern at Global Pittsburgh some years ago. So it's really great to know that David got to go there as well for this program. As noted by our Assistant Secretary, as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the ADA this year, we continue to expand the IVLP focus on disability rights in collaboration with partners throughout the Global Ties Network and really around the world. In fact, since 2010, our IVLP programming on themes related to disability rights and social inclusion has included more than 800 international visitors like David in more than 120 different projects. So these are people who have gone all over our country looking at what we do, bringing their ideas from their home countries, and then taking those ideas back home to expand, as the Assistant Secretary said, access for all. Certainly there is so much that I'm sure that David will talk about of what he found in the United States, but also we know that there's always work to be done. We have succeeded in the United States in eliminating many barriers in employment, education, transportation, government services, and telecommunications. But we still have work to do. And so I'm sure that through David's participation in Reno and Pittsburgh and elsewhere, he's seeing what's going on today and what are some opportunities for the future. And in some respects, maybe we'll even find that with the pandemic, there are new opportunities. We're certainly finding at the State Department the opportunity to reach into newer and different communities that we might not always be able to do in person, that we may actually be able to do electronically. For the Gold Star Initiative, of which David is one of 50 extraordinary IVLP alumni over the past 10 years, this way we pick people who have really made a difference in their communities upon returning back home. And so we typically bring these Gold Star alumni, several each year, to the United States. They usually visit one of the cities that they participated in their program in the United States and then go to some new cities. But of course, this year we've had to do it all virtually. And so we'll be eager to hear from David, from the program in Reno, the program in Pittsburgh, how it's all working, and as we learn new ideas for the future. In any given year, we bring about 5,000 current and emerging leaders to the United States. And we've had about 225,000 IVLP alumni in 80 years. Yes, we are celebrating our 80th anniversary, and it is wonderful that we're able to rely on our partners like the Northern Nevada Group, like Global Pittsburgh, like Meridian, like Global Ties, and frankly, all of our partners across the country. Through these efforts, emerging leaders from across the globe come to the United States, and they really interact with American participants in every single type of project you can imagine. So thank you again to our guests in Reno, in Pittsburgh, across the United States, and really across the globe. Thank you for joining our deliberation today, and back to you, Karina, in Reno. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Das Crystal. We appreciate the support of the U.S. Department of State, and we hope to be back in line very, very soon to host people, not just virtually, but in person. With that, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Judge Francis Doherty, who is a retired judge who served in the family division of the 2nd Judicial District Court in Washoe County, Nevada, from 1997 to 2019. First as an appointed court master and then as a 3-time elected district court judge. During her tenure, she served 3 times as presiding judge for the family. Throughout her career, Judge Doherty focused her efforts on improving systems of services for children and families, working specifically on legal representation for children, reducing detention for children in the juvenile justice system, and initiating mandates on the state level for vulnerable persons, especially people with disabilities. Judge Doherty currently presides as senior judge appointed by the Supreme Court of Nevada. She is a board member of the Northern Nevada International Center and performs pro bono services for the National Judicial College and the National Council for Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Judge Doherty continues to speak locally and nationally on family law matters and on preserving civil rights and independence of people with disabilities. Judge Doherty, we are so grateful that you are serving on our board and that we can rope you into doing events like these with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karina. It's certainly an honor to have worked with you. Quite frankly, our work goes back many more years than perhaps either of us would like to acknowledge. But your tenacity in our community for international and human rights stands out as a stellar symbol of the most important things that we all need to value. So thank you very much. Susan Crystal, thank you for that introduction and for the work that the State Department has done on behalf of integrating international issues into single issues without boundaries of civil rights and human rights. And it's such an honor now for me to speak to someone who has become a hero to many of us in the community advancing human rights and civil rights on a domestic and international basis. And that is the ability to meet and talk with Mr. David Anyaele for a period of time in which I'm sure we'll be enriched and I'm sure we'll continue to grow as a community based on your words and our efforts. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Anyaele by indicating that when he came here in 2017 under the International Visitors Leadership Program through the Department of State and the Northern Nevada International Center, he was one of many, as Ms. Crystal has indicated, of persons to connect with the United States, bring international issues to us to understand, and then share and take back international appreciation for the advancement of civil rights. And now, sir, as a Gold Star member, as one of only a few to be recognized as a leader in our country, we are so benefited by your presence here today and want to congratulate you again on your work. David Anyaele was and is the executive director for the Center of Citizens with Disabilities, and in that capacity has really accomplished what many would have predicted would not be attainable, and that is the passage of the Disability Act of 2018, signed by the President in January of 2019. An accomplishment so magnificent and so substantial that we in this country continue to celebrate our passage of 30 years ago. So many more years of work, no doubt, are in your future. But tell us a little bit now, sir, if you will, about your story and how you reached the point of advancing and advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities and accomplishing such significant goals on behalf of Nigeria and, of course, on behalf of the international community.
Thank you so much, Honorable Francis Doherty. I'm so excited to speak today to the distinguished good people of the United States of America. As you rightly said, my name is David Obinna Anyaele. I'm the Executive Director, Center for Citizens with Disabilities. My background is that I was raised in Aba, Abia State of Nigeria. I studied in Iforo Primary School. Thereafter, I moved to Wilcox Memorial Comprehensive Secondary School. I did my first National Diploma Program on Public Relations with the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. Thereafter, I studied Management Science with University of Education, Winneba, Ghana. I'm currently doing postgraduate program with Babcock University, Ileshan, Remo, Ogun State, Nigeria. My interest to do business like our fathers, because my background, our fathers were businessmen. I decided to focus on being an entrepreneur. My vision was to open companies across Africa. As such, I began by acquiring skill as a clearing and forwarding agent, doing shipping for clients. In 1995, I began to do exports to other countries. I exported to Sao Tome and Principe. I exported to Angola. And thereafter, a friend of mine introduced me to a business in Liberia. And Liberia then was just coming out from the Civil War, in which the then president, Mr. Charles Taylor, won the election after the war. So based on that proposal, I joined my friend in Liberia for business. We were there to export building materials and motor spare parts to the country. But because of the attitude and behavior of the government and the people of Liberia to Nigerians, due to Nigerian involvement in ECOMOG peacekeeping operation, and our government insistence that the restructuring of Liberia must be in line with the Abuja Agreement. The then government were not happy with Nigerian people. As such, there was high level of hostility. That made me to relocate from Liberia to Sierra Leone. During that period, that was in 1998. I was in Sierra Leone for the business, and the business was moving. I made inquiries about security situation from our embassy. I was assured that the country is safe. It was that process that I continued with the business. In January 1999, the rebels, RUF rebels of Sierra Leone, struck. While they were trying to capture the government, the Nigerian contingent of ECOMOG repelled them, and thereafter declared open up operation to clear the rebels from Freetown. The rebels were going house to house looking for Nigerians to kill and maim. On the 19th of January 1999, the rebels captured my residence and they took me to where other Nigerians were held hostage. They accused us of supporting the government to attack them. In the process, the rebels decided that they are going to amputate our hands, they are going to kill anybody in Nigeria. I tried to beg them. I asked them any amount they want, I'm going to give to them. They can equally go to my residence and take whatever thing they want so that to spare Nigerians. Before I knew it, they picked my friend, Obinna, who is also a Nigerian. They amputated his 2 hands, and the guy bleeded and died. They brought his elder brother, Anyaele. They also amputated his 2 hands. At that juncture, I began to negotiate with the rebels to ensure that they spare my life and others. Then later the captain came and said that he's not going to die because of a Nigerian. As such, he's going to implement the instruction. And the instruction was that my 2 hands would be cut off. So as I tried to resist, a small boy, about 12 years old, 12, 14 years, who was carrying AK-47, cocked the rifle to open fire on me. It was then that I gave them my left hand and I asked them that they should cut it. So they cut off my left hand. It was bleeding. I was crying and screaming. They said that they also want my right hand. I asked them any amount they want, I'm going to buy the hand. They said no. They cut off. They asked me if I resist, they will kill me. It was then I positioned my right hand and they cut it off. I was crying and begging and praying to God to spare me. They were angry with me, saying, why must I call God? They brought fuel and set me on fire. While the fire was blazing, the captain or the commander of the group of the rebels there saw that I was on fire, and he was like, who set me on fire? That I should go back to Nigeria and tell Nigerians that they should stop attacking them in the name of ECOMOG. That Nigeria does not belong to, that Sierra Leone does not belong to Nigerians, it belongs to Sierra Leone. Then Nigeria was supporting the government through ECOMOG peacekeeping operations. I left the place. I got support from the UN monitoring group that later helped me and evacuated me to Connaught Hospital, where I was given first aid, my stumps refashioned. Thereafter, the Nigerian contingent of ECOMOG came forward to the hospital, evacuated me back to Nigeria. While in Nigeria, I spent 6 months in the hospital. My stumps, because I suffered with degree burn, took a long time for me to recuperate. On the 30th of August, I was confirmed stable. The process of trying to assess rehabilitation, reintegration was a huge mountain that I must climb. I was asked to visit our government for support, since I'm not a military man, because I was in the military hospital. Efforts to get support from our then government was unsuccessful. Our state governor, Chief Fortunes Okalo, could not assist me to get artificial hands. Our federal government could not assist me to get artificial hands. So I resort to private individuals. My story was publicized across the media. Well, I got a group, came together and mobilized more resources for me. I was evacuated to Germany, where I was given my electrically below able prosthesis. While I was doing this, I was also going to hospital to see new amputees, to support them, to share with them how to overcome stigma and challenges of in-laws. By 2002, the board of Amputees Representation Foundation was inaugurated. Amputee Rehabilitation Foundation was the organization we established to support needy amputees to ensure that they get rehabilitation and return back to normal life. While we are doing this program, other persons or other classes of persons with disabilities were interested in what we are doing, like the blind, the deaf, the physically challenged. We are all interested in our work, and they began to join us in our program. By 2007, we discovered that to address issues of rehabilitation and reintegration, we must activate right-based approach or social model of disability. Because while we are doing Amputee Rehabilitation Foundation, we are applying what we call charity or medical-based model. It was in the course of that the name of Amputee Rehabilitation Foundation was changed to Center for Citizens with Disabilities, where we began to demand for inclusion, for access, for participation, for activation of legal framework that will protect citizens with disabilities. Because bulk of the challenge was that there was no law in Nigeria that protects people with disabilities from discrimination and harmful practices. In fact, Section 42 of the Nigerian Constitution as amended is silent on discrimination on the grounds of disability. This is what informed our engagement to ensure that we secure a legal framework to protect people with disabilities. We organized a project promoting access to justice for people with disabilities. During that project, which was supported by a group called Justice for All Program, in the course, we conducted research and we discovered that access to justice for people with disabilities in Nigeria was very, very slim. All justice institutions in Nigeria do not understand disability issues. So it was a serious issue of concern for people with disabilities. You can't imagine how a deaf person, a blind person could access justice in Nigeria when there is stigma, discrimination, inaccessible environment, minimal legal framework. So it was a huge task. We began to promote for the passage of disability laws in Nigeria at the state and federal level. We will first of all champion the passage of Lagos State Special Purpose Law, which protects citizens with disabilities from discrimination and harmful practices. It was after we got that law passed and we continued to promote the implementation of that law and also to secure the passage of the law at the national level. I joined other civil society organizations to promote these activities in 2007, but those who were leading it, they were not able to understand the capacity and capabilities required to do this work. On my part and my colleagues at CCD, we are also looking for opportunity to see how we can acquire skill necessary to push for the passage of the disability bill at the National Assembly. We are privileged to get a support from Open Society Initiative for West Africa, a branch of Open Society Foundation, Open Society Initiative. They supported us to promote the passage of the disability bill at the National Assembly. While we were doing that, we started that project in 2014. We tried 2014. By 2015, government there was an election. A new government took over, and the bill was not signed. A new National Assembly was also inaugurated. So we continue to push, lobbying the National Assembly, lobbying the executive, lobbying civil society organizations, lobbying development partners for them to mainstream disability issues in their work. I was privileged in 2017 to be nominated to attend IVLP program. I didn't know about the program It was just that while we were doing our work, I didn't know that diplomats at the American mission in Nigeria were monitoring our work. And one day they visited us and they were asking us what we do, and we shared with them all our reports, some of the work we have done, areas of our success, some of the challenges we are facing. And they were pleased to solidarize with us. And before I knew it, I was invited in 2017 to be part of IVLP program focusing on marginalized population and healthcare. I was excited. I was privileged to travel to US for the first time with my wife. It was a good time, even though the cold was too much. but it was indeed a good time, from Washington, D.C. to New York, from New York to Jacksonville, Florida, from there to Georgia. We were also privileged to visit Reno, Nevada. At Reno, Nevada, I was privileged to interface with different civil society organizations working on disability, working on healthcare issues, in particular, Nevada Disabilities Resource Center, and the school resource center as well. The University Resource Center was also there, and in particular at the Nevada Disability Center, the executive director, Mr. Jack, gave me one document, on how to become a successful safe advocate. I read the document, I analyzed it. By the time I get back to Nigeria after the program, I was privileged to come back and use some of the things I've learned from that document and my experience in the US, how they pursue human rights issues. Gingered and motivated me to continue to push. I coordinated coalition of disability organizations in Nigeria. We successfully lobbied the National Assembly, they passed the bill. We also successfully lobbied the President of Nigeria, and he signed the bill, January 2019. It was a success story because nobody believed that what we are doing could be successful. We applied lobbying, advocacy, campaigns, street protests, media engagements, to the extent that we had to deploy spiritual help because we had to do praying and fasting. The day we did that praying and fasting, we call on God to help us to touch the hearts of our leaders and to make a way for us where there is no way. 6 hours after that prayer meeting in Abuja, we got the news that His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the bill into an act. It was a huge relief. It was like a dream. I couldn't believe it, that at last we are coming to the end of the struggle, which is the phase 1. My visit to US was encouraging. I must thank all the people that I got in touch with during the process for their support in this regard. We are pushing for the implementation of the Disabilities Act. January this year, 17th, was the first year we celebrated the anniversary of the passage of the National Disabilities Act here in Nigeria. The law is called Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Act 2018. While we are still pushing, because as I speak to you, the government is yet to make commitment for the implementation of the National Disabilities Act, in particular, activating Section 2 and Section 31 of the Act, which provide that the Federal Ministry of Information should take measure to create awareness on the rights of persons with disabilities. Section 31 provides that they should establish a National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. this commission is expected to provide guidelines and policies to support government program and activities to ensure people with disabilities are not left behind. And here we are, where we are providing this COVID-19 caught up with us. COVID-19, a global disruption. We didn't understand what was going on. We had to lock our office. But while we were dodging from COVID-19, the question is, how are the government, whose responsibility is to protect people with disabilities, how are they doing it? So it was from there we began to, do a social media campaign on the need to include people with disabilities in Nigerian response to COVID-19. We were able to succeed in drawing federal government attention on the need to extend palliatives to people with disabilities. Many states, we engage in them. We did a lot of TV appearances, radio programs, newspaper publication. We issued different press releases. In fact, we went as far as conducting a survey, or more or less do a kind of monitoring of government response on COVID-19 and persons with disabilities. And the key findings is that government palliatives are not reaching to people with disabilities. Government response to disability is very weak. Today, we are using the outcome of that document to engage in advocacy for more government attention to issues of people with disability. In particular, we are asking that there should be a data segregated by disability. We're also saying that government must ensure that isolation centers are accessible to people with disabilities, just as we're saying here, access for all. Moving forward, we are mobilizing support, we are mobilizing resources to ensure full implementation of the Disabilities Act. My interface with my colleagues in the struggle in Petersburg, during this Gold Star program, has also renewed my strength in terms of pursuing to ensure that we cover what we are looking for. The story of Senator John Lewis that died just this Sunday also triggered my energy to tell me that even at 80, we'll probably continue to campaign for the right of everyone. An injustice against one is an injustice against all. With these experiences and others which I'm going to get from the relationship I've built so far, I believe it won't be long. We shall overcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anyaele. I so appreciate how you have ended your presentation and wanted to kind of follow up on that quickly. Thank you for mentioning Congressman John Lewis, who has inspired the entire nation to pursue civil rights despite years and decades of challenges. And there was a recent quote from John Lewis. You probably have read it, or perhaps more realistically, you've lived it. And the quote is, "Our struggle is the struggle of a lifetime. Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in some good trouble. Necessary trouble."
Yeah, it is a good trouble we are making now.
Right? Can you relate to that statement of John Lewis, that good trouble?
Good trouble, yeah.
And have you, in your years of advocacy, been in a situation beyond your first trauma that continues to be good trouble? You said you marched in the streets. You said you coalesced with mutual supporters. You said you engaged spiritual support, which you thought was very effective. And that's because you had adversaries pushing back at you, I assume. So was that good trouble something that you could relate to?
Yeah, there are a lot of them. We decided to demand for the conclusion of the passage of the Disability Bill at the National Assembly on the 10th of October 2018, because we discovered that the National Assembly was about to reconvene from recess, and our observation showed that they were not interested on disability issue or concluding the passage of the Disability Bill at the National Assembly. On the 10th of October 2018, I mobilized people with disabilities for good trouble. We marched from Eagle Square and we moved to the National Assembly. Our National Assembly is so barricaded and fenced with big gates, and the policemen blocked the way. I had to mobilize people with disabilities, in particular the deaf, people with hearing impairment. I commanded them and they moved to the gate and removed the gate immediately. They pushed the gate out and we marched straight to the National Assembly. And while we were marching, the policemen wanted to make trouble, and we told them that we are ready to match their arms with our fist, because enough is enough. It was our friends from the media that beckoned on me that I should restrain. You know, the blind were there, the deaf people were there, the people on wheelchair were there, and we were able to before you knew it, the Senate President sent delegates to come and address us. And they addressed us, and I gave them ultimatum that within 1 week, if the bill was not passed and transmitted to the President for assent, that we are going to disrupt National Assembly sitting. I gave them 1 week. It will interest you to know, within that 1 week, they concluded the passage of the legislative process on the disability bill, and it was transmitted. That is where we made good trouble. And after, on the 16th of January, we discovered that the bill had been sent to the President, and the President and his men at the Aso Villa, they were not presenting the bill to Mr. President. In fact, on the 16th of January, I was in a town hall meeting with the President of Nigeria because he was campaigning for re-election, in which I asked him his plans about prohibiting discrimination against people with disabilities, recognizing that on the 21st of March 2015, while he was campaigning to be president for the first tenure, he promised to work with the National Assembly, Nigerian National Assembly, to pass a law that will protect people's abilities. Regrettably, when I asked him the question about the bill that had been sent to him for assent, the president said he's not aware. That's what the president said. He said he's not aware that the bill has been passed. He's not aware that the bill is in his office. That statement created a kind of, media attention, public attention. Some people were claiming that I'm not correct. Some were saying that the president is correct. But I knew that I was more than correct than any other person because I was the one following it up. In fact, when the bill was transmitted to his office, I saw the dispatch note. So the following day on the 17th, I mobilized people with disabilities, 17th of January 2019. I mobilized people with disabilities in Nigeria to his office to demand for his assent on the bill. It will interest you to know, Honorable, that that day was the day the President signed the bill. So that was the day the President signed the bill, but they couldn't make it public because they claimed that the bill has not been sent to them. So they kept it. It was on the 23rd, about 1 week plus, 1 week after the engagement with the president, in which he said that he's not aware that the bill has been signed, that they made it public. And that was the day we did that praying and fasting, seeking for spiritual help to get the bill passed, because we discovered there were forces working against us at the executive. So 1 week after, they made it public, but the date on the bill was on the 17th of January, the day we protested and blocked his office. That was the day they signed it. But they couldn't make it public because they felt that they've already told the public that the bill, they're not aware that the bill has been sent to him. So he delayed it for 1 week before making it public, in order to show that it was maybe between that 1 week and that period that the bill was sent. We understand what happened. So I've made good trouble, man. The Chancellor, the former Liberian president, he's today in the prison by the International Criminal Court in Hague. The former president of Liberia, who was sentenced for his involvement in the rebel activities in the Republic of Liberia. Honorable, it will interest you to know that I initiated the process. I took him to court in Nigeria. When he came to Nigeria to seek refuge, I subpoenaed 6 government officials, including the then president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, the foreign affairs minister, the refugee commission, the Disabilities Committee of the Refugee Commission, all the people that participated in granting him asylum in Nigeria. I subpoenaed all of them, and the court ruled in my favor that I have a legal standing to challenge the asylum given to the former president of Liberia, and that led to his arrest and subsequent conviction in Hague. Today, he's serving 60 years imprisonment in Hague for his activities in. So I know how to make good trouble, man. I'm just giving you small of my profile in making good trouble.
Certainly do. And, you know, every time you speak, you recite new advocacy efforts of significant substance, and you are at the center of them. On January 17, 2019, there you were. In February, you marched with the person who committed to support rights, even though he subsequently said he didn't have that bill in front of him. But you didn't leave it. And I guess just to take a step backwards, a step back, not backwards, but back. What is astonishing about your personal story is that after the horrific atrocities against you and against your colleagues, and the trauma of not only your attack, but the witnessing of your colleagues' deaths, in your treatment, and shortly thereafter, the first thing
if you can hear me,
the first thing you did was go to speak to other people who had amputation experiences. And I guess my question was, what is the core within you that propels you to persevere in the face of personal struggles, in the face of tsunami-like opposition? What is it within you to continue this fight and to pursue this battle to the degree that you have, with the compassion that you've shown?
Thank you so much, Honorable. A lot of factors were responsible. In particular, my background. I'm the first son of my father. My father is also the first son of his father. My grandfather was the first son of his father. So I have a lineage, I have a inheritance to protect. The cutting off my 2 hands brings shame and humiliation to our family. It reduced us to poverty. As a young guy who was aspiring to be a successful man, suddenly cut off in the course of struggle in life. It was a huge shame on me. I suffered discrimination, exclusion, marginalization, to the extent that friends isolated me. My government isolated me. The system I trusted isolated me. I had to relocate from Abia State to Lagos State in order for me to stay in an environment that can allow me to breathe by reason of my disability. That was when I saw how God saved me, I begin to ask myself, what is God's plan for me? I believe in Christian, I'm a faith person. I know the Bible. I read the Bible very well. And I came to the realization that it is not the God's plan for me to suffer what I suffered. And that his plan for me is to prosper me, not to harm me, but to grant me hope and a future. I also discovered that using my faith and my Bible, that there is a foreman who was the foremost activist. His name is Moses, and he struggled for the rescue of his people. And I discovered that I cannot do activism without, leaning on a creator, a superior power to help me, which is my Savior, Jesus Christ. When I realized all this, appreciating that it is written also in the Bible I read and believe so much, that we should speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. We should stand for the rights of the poor in the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, verse 8 and 9. Appreciating that in the book of Matthew also, chapter 25, verse 6, it says, as we do unto some of these people, unto him, our God, and he assured me that he will not leave me behind. I wanted God to use me because people contributed money that led to my survival. And I said, the only way for me to return this is to stand for those who are under this condition, to fight for them, to speak for them, to use my influence, everything within me to make a change. This is what propelled me. This is what propelled me to stand, to speak. And I'm excited that I'm able to contribute the little I'm able to do. And I believe that other people will equally continue. I'm so happy because there's a prayer I always pray. I always say, oh Lord, if you can use anyone, you can use me. Touch my heart, touch my mouth, touch my eyes, speak through me. If you can use anyone, you can use me. And I promise myself that I'm going to contribute to make this world a better place than the way I met it. That is what led to it.
I'm sure John Lewis would agree with your passion and spirituality in the work that he accomplished. And his duration, of course, was over a period of decades and 40 arrests and many beatings. And I know you know, and we know that the civil rights pursuit is not finished. And I'd like to turn a little bit to a little historical reference with respect to the Discrimination Against Persons Act in Nigeria, and whether or not the influence of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the American with Disabilities Act influenced the creation and passage of the Nigerian Act in ways that assisted its passage.
In fact, the American Disabilities Act is a role model to all disability rights activists across the world. The story, the history behind the struggle to secure ADA is inspirational. In the course of my research and study, I met big names. I was also privileged to watch them on the video of American persons with disabilities whose resolve to make a difference, even in the face of hardship by reason of their disability, promoted and compelled me to do what I did. Also, the coming into force of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, including its optional protocol, which was signed and ratified by the Nigerian government, added credence to the need for us to have a law that protects people with disabilities. In Nigeria, signing an international treaty and ratifying it is not our issue. Our major issue is the ability of the executive to transmit such legislation to the National Assembly for domestication. Without domestication, it will not come into force. So while we are waiting for Nigeria to fulfill their commitment and obligation to the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, we are also lobbying and campaigning, advocating that we should be able to activate our own legal framework that speaks to the provisions of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities in order to ensure that more than 25 million Nigerians with disabilities, with 80% living in rural areas, with minimal access to social infrastructures, are protected. So I must tell you, man, that American Disabilities Act contributed in no small measure in the understanding of what we want, because it was like a template, for us to engage in the struggle. And Nigerian signature to the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities also put them on the spot to accelerate commitment by putting in place measures to ensure that the commitment is put to fruition. Thank you.
Excuse me. When I read Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, the Nigerian Act, I noticed a few things that were not exactly the same as the ADA. One is the inclusion of not only fines and a private right of action, which is excellent, but also criminal consequences. And I'm wondering, as you sit here today, a year and a half after its signature, what the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, what stage is that commission at in being able to enforce those very significant consequences in terms of overseeing construction, imposing fines, certifying disability? How has the commission progressed in its establishment and oversight as we sit here today?
Yeah, the establishment of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities is expected to serve as a monitoring mechanism in terms of state institutions' response to the Disabilities Act. It is designed to provide guidelines, technical support to both the government and the private sector, as well as guiding expectations of people with disabilities on the expectations from government program and activities. Regrettably, as I speak to you, that commission is yet to be established. Part of the activities we did early this year, before the advent of coronavirus, was that we did a protest march again. We made a good trouble. And we marched to the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. When we got to the office of the government, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, they pretend that they don't want to see us, but we assure them that we are going to pull their gate down. When they heard that, they appeared by force, by fire. What did we go there to do? We went there to demand that they should establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, because it is the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation that is responsible for coordinating government activities, including establishing this commission. It's also expected that the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Show of Infrastructure will advise the President on what to do. Regrettably, as I speak to you, people with disabilities are still treated with disdain. People with disabilities commission is yet to be established. It's a worrisome, but we are also mobilizing. Even under this COVID, we are mobilizing we are strategizing. We are deploying our arsenal to identify entry points that we could use to engage state institutions and to call their attention on the need to remove all barriers and ensure access for all, especially disabilities in government program activities. That's where we are, man.
So that I can appreciate how challenging that is to have such a dynamic piece of legislation, many parts of which are dependent upon the commission and not yet have the commission established. But you've gone beyond that, especially in your work with COVID-19, to kind of step over those barriers and take on national education and a voice in COVID-19. Could you just tell us a little bit more? We are struggling with COVID-19 in this country. Could you tell us a little bit more about your work in that area and how responsive persons have been to the information that you've shared?
Yeah, thank you so much. Prior to the emergence of COVID-19, we've intervened on health-related issues, in particular, a project which we organized on, which we implemented on promoting HIV education and prevention among persons with disabilities in Lagos State. In the course of implementing that project, we came to the full realization that access to health care services in Nigeria among people with disabilities is very slim. That empowered us to begin to demand for accessible healthcare services. Part of the provisions of the National Disabilities Act, in particular, Section 25, 26, and 27, it provides that where there are medical services, in healthcare services, that people with disabilities should be given priority. It also provides that where they are accused, that people with disabilities should be given priority. In Section 27, in particular, states that in a state of emergency, that people with disabilities should be given priority as well. All these provisions and our background as a country that pay minimal attention to issues affecting people with disabilities compel us to open our eyes to see how government will respond to these provisions as encapsulated in the National Disabilities Act. We waited for 1 week, 2 weeks, but before that, before the announcement of the lockdown, we issued a statement that we discovered that there is a coronavirus is ravaging the earth, and we draw the attention of our government to take appropriate measures to ensure that people with disabilities are protected, that their response systems are disability sensitive. We all even asked them to ensure that they liaise with organizations of persons with disabilities across board. We demanded that the government presidential task force on COVID-19 should include a person with disability so that they will be able to contribute, ensure that they are not left behind. That was the beginning of our intervention in COVID-19. We were privileged to get support from Open Society Initiative for West Africa, as well as Disability Rights Fund, to intervene by creating awareness around COVID-19 and persons with disabilities. Using that intervention, we are able to design IEC materials, education, information, and communication materials that speaks on COVID-19 and persons with disabilities. We are able to engage the media, issue press releases. In fact, we build the capacity of persons with disabilities across Nigeria on COVID-19. We even went further. to share palliatives through cash transfers to people with disabilities in more than 5 states in Nigeria. We also went further to call our attention of private sectors to put attention on COVID-19 response and persons with disabilities. Part of the success story we've achieved includes that we have been able to draw the attention of the federal government, which led to extension of palliative to people with disabilities in Abuja. Just last week, Friday, following our monitoring report on COVID-19 palliative distribution and persons with disabilities in 5 states, one of the states, I want to believe, they saw the report and they've responded positively. Last Friday, they announced that people with disabilities in all the counties, in all the local governments, should go to their local government, their county, for their palliative. This is a success story we just achieved recently. In other states also, we are also collaborating and drawing attentions. We're also giving support in terms of knowledge on what is required to respond to COVID-19 among persons with disabilities. These are the things we are doing to do. We thank Disability Rights Fund, as well as Open Society Initiative for West Africa for their support, as well as UK Aid through our partnership with Action Aid on strengthening citizens' resistance to the prevalence of corruption project, which helped us to gather this data, as well as support people with disabilities in different ways. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, and I'm sure we would benefit from more international discussion with you in that initiative. So congratulations on your good work. Good trouble again.
I'm learning how to make better trouble now.
We're going to turn to Michael Graf of the Northern Nevada International Center, and he's going to convey some questions to you from our listeners. We've been receiving very positive comments as you and I have been chatting, and I'm sure that there are questions that persons would like to ask you directly, so we're going to allow for that possibility. But thank you for the opportunity to ask and answer those questions. I so enjoyed it. Okay, Mr. Graf.
Thank you, Judge Doherty, and thank you, David, for such a wonderful discussion. We have about 4 questions in the Q&A section now. The first one is from one of our local supporters and longtime international relations friends of all of ours, Ambassador Ted Morse. Ambassador, thank you for joining us today. I'm happy to hear from you. Your question is to David. David, how do you see the continuing work in Sierra Leone with young people permanently disabled by the RUF?
How am I? Please repeat the question.
Okay.
Please repeat the question. It was not clear.
Sure. How do you see the continuing work in Sierra Leone with young people permanently disabled by the RUF?
Yeah, I think it's important that young people who are permanently, who permanently suffer disability in Freetown, Sierra Leone, are encouraged to participate in government program activities. In particular, it would be very good if government and development partners' response to development and other governance issues use these young people who are victims of what they don't know to address, development challenges in Freetown, Sierra Leone. It may interest you to know that ever since I left Sierra Leone in 1999, I've not stepped my foot in Freetown again. The only day I came close to Freetown, I stopped at the airport because I was on transit. I didn't even come out from the plane. I stayed in the plane throughout until the aircraft left. However, I'm in touch with civil society organizations, especially organizations of people with disabilities in Freetown, Sierra Leone, in which we are working together to, address regional related issues, especially as it has to do with people with disabilities. I want to use this opportunity and this program to call on government of Sierra Leone to not to leave people with disabilities in Freetown, Sierra Leone behind in their response to development activities. I'm also asking development partners working in Freetown, Sierra Leone to sustain their support to organizations of people with disabilities, to use a bottom-to-top approach in addressing their development campaigns so that these children will add value to their nations. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The next question is from Carol Moore, and she's asking, David, to you, what opportunities are available for those with disabilities in Nigeria in regards to sports and recreation? And if they are available, how are they funded and supported by the government?
Hello, Mike.
Yes, David, can you hear me? David,
I'm not here. Okay, hello?
Okay, maybe we had a little break in the connection. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
great. I will repeat the question real quick. Carol Moore is asking, what opportunities are available for those with disabilities in Nigeria for sports and recreation? And if they are available, how are they funded and supported by the government?
I didn't tell you that I'm the president of the Nigerian City Volleyball Federation.
Well, David, I think your excitement broke the internet. I'm hoping that you could come back here momentarily. In the meantime, if anyone else has any additional questions, we can post them in the Q&A section. And if David is unable to join us again, we can have him respond to those questions at a later time. And we will add those to the official transcript and final video. And it looks like David is nearly back. So hang tight. Hi, David.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, good. So tell us about you being the president of the Sports Federation.
Yeah, I'm the current president of the City Football Federation. City Football Federation is a sport for on the physically challenged. You basically sit on the floor to play the game. Yeah. So
we see you.
Yeah, you can see me. Thank you. Sorry for the inconveniences. The other line came up as well. So in the course of doing this course, we discovered that the greatest employment opportunity for people with disabilities in Nigeria is in sporting activities. These sporting activities helps an average person with disabilities not only to participate in sports, but also find opportunity for integration and socialization. Nigeria is champion in Africa in terms of para-sports activities. Sports activities is a huge opportunity. Unfortunately, funding for sports activity for people with disabilities in Nigeria is very slim. We suppose our own federation is supposed to go for this Tokyo Olympic, if not this COVID-19. We're also supposed to be in US to participate in the final selections. Unfortunately, lack of funding could not allow us to participate. We tried to secure support from our government. We couldn't. Throughout last year, I spent bulk of my activities in Abuja, federal capital, with the permanent secretary, Federal Ministry of Sports and Youth Development, to help us with grants to enable my team, participate in the qualification series. Unfortunately, we couldn't get. I want to use this opportunity to call on our American friends any way you can support us in our sporting activities, be it in sitting volleyball, be it in athletics, be it in weightlifting, we'll be glad to collaborate with you. Early last year, a team came from America to Nigeria to build the capacity of people with disabilities, especially those that are in sports. My federation team members also benefited from it. But with your support, we can be able to do more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Our next question is from the IVLP liaison on David's initial IVLP visit to the US in 2017, Teresita Bernales. Thank you for joining us. David, she has a couple questions here. She's asking, what provisions are there in the PWD Act of Nigeria? She's saying that in her travels to other countries, PWDs have many privileges. For example, preferential seating in public transportation, free parking, substantial discounts like 20% off of food, clothing, hotels, movies, and other entertainment venues. Is this good, or does it just highlight disabilities? Are there any pros and cons?
Yeah, our act has pros, it has cons, being the first one, which we secure by in our effort to make good trouble. The law prohibits all forms of discrimination on the grounds of disability. It also provides, priority in queues, first consideration in situation of emergency. It went further to compel all public buildings to be reconstructed and be made accessible to all. The Act criminalizes any abuse of building code that led to limited access to people with disabilities. The Act provides for free education up to secondary school level, free medical health care, in particular, person with mental disability. So these are the basic, and it also encourages special education by ensuring a subsidized support for teachers and others that are teaching in disability-related studies. As I said, the Disability Act is a product of struggle. It's a product of making good trouble. It has a lot of weaknesses, but as time goes on, we are going to review it using other existing good practices across the world to encourage our parliament to take measure to enhance the quality of legal framework on people with disabilities. These are the things we are looking forward, in the nearest future.
Excellent, David. We have one last question for you from the audience, and I'd like to turn it over to Honorable Judge Doherty again for any of her closing remarks. But David, the last question from the audience is, apart from Sierra Leone, what relationship between your organization and the Association of People with Disabilities in other African countries? And I think to summarize that a little bit better is, what work are you doing with other countries and other organizations in other countries in Africa and abroad to help people with disabilities?
Thank you so much. CCD has ties with different organizations of people with disabilities and institutions in Africa. In Zimbabwe, we have our partner called DAT. In Egypt, we have a partner, National Center for Technology and Persons with Disabilities. As I speak to you, we are collaborating with the National Center for ICT and Persons with Disabilities in Egypt and the organization called Cisco in Kenya to organize a webinar this Friday that focuses on the use of ICT in the midst of COVID-19 for sustainable development. So the webinar is going to take place this Friday. This intervention is an initiative of CCD in which we are collaborating with Egyptian government as well as Egyptian National Center on ICT and Persons with Disabilities to support other DPOs, organizations of people with disabilities across Africa on assessing resources that can enhance their activities in this pandemic period. So these are some of the things we are doing with other organizations in Africa. And with my exposure in this Gold Star program, we've agreed, I agree with Jackson at Nevada Disability Law Resource Center, for collaborations in terms of, enhancing what we are doing. My colleagues in Petersburg, we have also agreed that we are going to strengthen our ties, ensure that we mobilize resources across for common good. In fact, part of the campaign we've agreed we are going to host, which is CCD campaign currently, our campaign on access to airports. The hashtag is #AccessibleAirports. We are using this hashtag and this campaign to draw the attention of governments and institutions across the world on the need to ensure that access to airports are, widened for the protection of people's abilities, appreciating that COVID-19 commands physical distancing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I actually have one more question that was posted to the chat board, and we do have time for it. The question is, David, is how can we engage national governments and international agencies to help people of Nigeria acquire special devices such as artificial limbs and financial assistance? The questioner says that they do not have social welfare support for those in Nigeria. Additionally, how can your institutions partner with developments organizations such as journalists to promote the rights of persons with disabilities?
Yeah, part of the things we are doing is to generate data to support interventions. Where here in Nigeria, we have minimal data that help groups to intervene in specific area. So what CCD does is to support in providing data. Where there are capacity gap and creating linkage between a donor and a possible organization of possibilities that should benefit from such intervention, CCD play critical role in this regard. CCD have supported many organizations of possibilities in Nigeria to get support from different development agencies. CCD is also in a good position to identify possible recipients, beneficiaries, and to do a kind of baseline that can make sure that resources are deployed at the right place at the right time. These are the things that CCD could do in collaboration with development partners, collaboration with media, in collaboration with other interest groups, including philanthropists, to ensure that the right people are the right people who are getting these support systems.
All right, thank you, David. I'm going to turn it over to Judge Doherty one last time, and then we will conclude our session here shortly. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, David. I have to say I was really inspired by your reference to Jack Mays of Reno, Nevada, and his directorship of the Disability Law Center, because to have someone in our community be such an influence and connect with someone you in your community really gives me great optimism that those two men working on similar issues who otherwise had no reason to know each other, both connected, influenced, and produced greater outcomes through communication than otherwise existed. And it gives me great hope for your work, for our work, and for international efforts, because there's a common reference to where civil rights are deprived in one place, they're deprived in all places. Where poverty exists in one place, it exists in all places. Where inhumanity occurs in one place, there's inhumanity in all places, because we cannot tolerate in any place deprivation of rights, inhumanities, and lack of equality. And your voice this morning has been such an inspiration to believe and to know that we are all together working on the same issues and making each of our work efforts better. And I really can't thank you enough from a personal viewpoint, from a professional viewpoint, and as a member and citizen of this country and as internationally. I just want to thank you personally and hope that we can continue this dialogue in the future. And if you have any last words, we would love to hear them because we've so enjoyed every one of your words this morning.
Thank you so much, Honorable. It's such an honor to interface with you. This is what disability can create. There is no way in my life without my disability that I will have access to speak to you or to share thoughts together. But disability and my work have brought me this far. I always tell people, who cares? That in every negative situation or situation of difficulty, if you bend down, you will see opportunity therein. And that was exactly what I've done with my disability. When my disability occurred, I accept there is disability. I also accepted that there's opportunity, but I don't know where the opportunity will come from. I deliberately chose to bend down. It has taken me 20 years in bending down, looking for opportunity. My friends were in business. They've made good money. They've built houses. Yes, I don't have a house in Lagos State, but I know that I'm happy what I'm doing. I'm excited in creating a better life for all, in particular, people with disabilities. That is what my disabilities have cost me. And I must assure you that I will keep in touch. I thank Michael. I thank all who made this thing possible. It's a thing of joy.
David and everybody on the panel, thank you so much for your amazing presentation. Your words are exactly why all of us do what we do every day. And thank you for reminding us. It's been a few months since we've been able to connect with international amazing people like you. So you have just made my week with your strength and your resilience. Thank you, thank you. I also want to thank David Mays. I hope that you now have a deeper understanding of how important you are as a resource in our community. And as Judge Doherty said, how important those connections are. And we don't always do a good enough job in reminding our resources of the importance they play in our international visitors. I also want to thank our home hosts with whom you re-met last week, Katie and Bill Langley and Janelle and Steve Mulvaney. Those are always important connections that you make. I want to thank our colleagues at the US Department of State and Meridian, Judge Doherty, Mike, Kevin, everyone on the NNIC's team who has worked really hard to putting this together. And of course, all the participants who are tuning in this morning. We are going to have this link available. We'll send it out to all of our email groups. And I'll just say, in the spirit of John Lewis, I hope everybody causes some good trouble today, tomorrow, this week, and this year. And thank you all again.
Thank you so much.